Hello, Something Guys and Gals. This is Something Guy 912. Accessibility, in certain circles, is a hot button topic. Depending on how one defines it, it can be as simple as adding colorblind mode, anti-epilepsy features, and control mapping for those both physically and visually impaired. But for others, accessibility often gets lumped into the more divisive topic of every game needs to have an easy mode. The problem with doing this, however, is that those literally disabled get used as a shield to deflect those who bemoan the concept, and as a sword to call those who dislike the concept as bigots who want to gatekeep difficulty in video games. And of no surprise to anyone, Jim Sterling was keen on doing just that. I guess irony comes full circle, because the demand for games to have an easy mode is chiefly argued by video game journalists, both so that they can review the game assuming to have completed it on a higher difficulty, and to complete the game in time for the next game to review. And Jim Sterling, having once parodied and mocked the concept of being a games journalist, has perched his sinking ship on that talking point himself. All of the usual mental gymnastics you would expect from him, with a further contempt for this vague gamer community that he supposedly depends on. Let's hear it.
Oh shit, it's loud. Oh shit, oh fuck. Okay, come up here. No, get down. Shipping punch. Oh, physical consequences of my actions. I have consequences of my actions. What's consequences? Oh shit, I'm bugs. Oh no. There was a ladder.
I should have prefaced that he uses Elden Ring as the backdrop to talk about games accessibility, which, if you haven't noticed from his brilliant commentary and gameplay of it, has nothing to do with the difficulty. Although, to be frank, I'm not sure what this particular clip has anything to do with the topic at hand, unless ladders are literally the way to access places, usually at a higher place, and difficulty scaling is ascending a higher level from the base.
Elden Ring has been released, and with it has come a flurry of discourse.
Hopefully this discourse is more salient than Quantum TV and Acer Thorn's discourse on it.
But the only real point in this discussion to be acknowledged is that I'm a better Elden Ring player than you.
From what I've seen of that clip, I think DSP's got your number. But I know you're being sarcastic, but also indulging in your massive ego too, to strawman a particular group of people whom will remain nameless and voidless for your benefit.
And I'm going to stake my entire identity on that. I might not be better at playing the game, but I'm better at enjoying the game than you, than all of you.
Question: how does one determine someone else is enjoying a game better than another? Sounds pretty subjective to me, even if I can tell when certain people are upset or bored when playing them.
Really? 1v1 me as we discuss the themes, bruh. I think that's all that really needs to be acknowledged, but I get paid to make videos, so I can't just go, so I suppose we better talk about video games instead of playing them.
I want you to keep this in mind as he says something really damning later to criticize the conversation regarding accessibility. Oh yeah, since we should bring up the elephant in the room, are you still calling yourself Jim Sterling, or is it Stephanie Sterling now? Is it rude for me to call you a he, despite the fact that you've never elaborated on how best to address you, and are at times extremely rude yourself? You might think it irrelevant for me to bring this up, but seeing as Jimbo hides behind his gender identity to deflect criticism, while hiding behind disabled people to make his laughably poor argument for accessibility, I think it's very telling his motives to doing anything in life as of late.
You know, I'm not one for the just shut up and play fucking video games rhetoric.
I think your TLO2 video would disagree, but what am I kidding? Every Jim Sterling video is like a different version of Jim Sterling I have to tackle, because at this point, you already have your audience, so it doesn't behoove you to remain consistent on much.
I do, in fact, find it quite tasteless and borderline offensive at times. I'm often told to just shut up and play video games when I dare to talk about industry abuse.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. Wasn't this the same tirade you drilled out in the TLO2 video when you tried to wax your politics over discussing the gaming industry?
Or examine game industry trends through a mildly political lens.
Oh, mildly, you say? So you think claiming that gamers want black people erased from a video game that historically wouldn't have it was you putting it mildly, huh? Or trying to conflate people's criticism of a in-game character to be comparable to sending harassment of said voice actor was putting it mildly? I don't know, man, or woman. It's kind of odd you downplay your own exaggeration of things when you no reason to at this point, nor even attempt feigning your ideology on the matter.
Or when I talk about social issues on my social media.
Well, yeah, I find that to be a bit irrelevant for them to complain about, but oh, wouldn't I just love to know what those social issues were, but alas, I'm too controversial for you to hear those issues, so I guess by your own logic, I should just shut up and play video games too.
The just play games attitude prevalent in the online gaming community is intellectually lazy, philosophically cowardly, and typifies aggressively apathetic centrism.
And you know what the extreme right and left hate more than the other side is the people who don't choose a side, am I right? And frankly, I find the idea that every gaming community space needing to be a hot box of politics to be intellectually lazy, because half the time it serves no relevance to the topic at hand. Just like how lazy you're going to be in trying to toxify this conversation to be political to service your side. Some people just simply aren't interested in the same issues as you are, Jim. You need to understand that instead of demanding they address it, because all that'll do is make them run straight to the other side of the conversation.
That one finds embodied by the privileged entitlement of a class of nerds that has never had to think about a real problem in their lifetime.
So let me get this straight. The only people who'd find themselves at the bevy of talking about politics on social media are the undermined and marginalized in your eyes? There isn't a whole slew of champagne socialists who wax stale about pet issues while sitting upon their ivory towers, unconcerned of how to reach the results they want. More importantly, it's cute how you're going to characterize yourself as marginalized in this equation, when by the very fact that you willingly chose to come out as non-binary when you've no inkling of it before, while still managing a decent view count despite your dwindling subscribers after years of doing this, is the very epitome of privileged. The people who you perceive to be marginalized also might not have any interest in talking about these social issues, nor have any compulsion to do so simply because you think they're oppressed. But when it comes to the bigotry of low expectations, Jim is chief among them.
All that said, if hardcore From Software fans could just shut the fuck up and play video games, I think I'd enjoy that very, very much.
Gotcha, so we're just pissing in the wind here with that rant you went on.
Let me specify that. I'm talking about a particular type of supposed, alleged, hardcore From Software fan.
That didn't sound like you were specifying anyone with what you said prior, unless you were just taking the piss earlier. I have to wonder then, if this hardcore FromSoft fan did talk about politics, or should I specify politics you agree with and happen to be marginalized, would that undermine this thesis you're making?
A new From Software game has been unleashed upon the world, and with it has come the same tiresome, dreary, circular discourse that occurs whenever FromSoft offers up its particular blend of challenge, depth, beautiful bleakness, and obfuscating lore.
Oh, you mean that every game should have an easy mode because game journals are too incompetent at the very medium they're supposed to be competent at?
As per the usual, the endless debate over game difficulty and accessibility has reared its all too familiar head.
If you didn't notice how deceitful Jim is being here, he has lumped accessibility and difficulty into one package when neither should be equated to the other. If anything, Jim has found himself trapped into this debate by conflating the two because he sincerely believes that when game journos demand an easy mode that they're doing it with the best of intentions.
And while I usually wade into the fray with embattled diligence to argue that easy modes are perfectly acceptable, optional, and not at all problematic in literally any video game,
Emphasis on acceptable, as in the video game already had packaged in an easy mode into the game and didn't do so after the fact by demand. Because easy modes, despite how Jim is going to characterize them, can be problematic to one's experience in playing a video game, as they can vastly affect your enjoyment if you happen to steamroll through the game. Especially problematic when it comes to games journals doing it, as their impressions will be vastly different as a result of doing so, which will then mislead gamers into thinking the game is a cakewalk or not scaled properly to the player's skill. Also, easy modes aren't just an anathema to the concept of challenge, because even a easy mode in Elden Ring may still prove challenging to someone, whereas a hard mode may not for another. What do you do then? Demand a easier mode for the game? Have the game literally play for you, completely dispossessing you of the reason you played it to begin with?
I'm not going to argue anymore, because it's not an argument these days, it's just a performance.
Man, what a damning statement on your behalf. I mean, you've already fucked yourself by insisting that it isn't an argument by having made the video and addressing the arguments of such, a foible you pulled in the TLO2 video by the same margin, but more importantly, you have no fucking clue the sincerity of those who are positing the argument. You've just declared that the entire point of this video is just to whinge for clout, meaning that any point you make about accessibility after the fact means nothing. Like you said, you get paid to make these videos, right? So why not engage in a bit of manufactured outrage to get some Darwin dues, right? All the while reaping the virtues of fighting for the disabled who need accessibility options when they never asked for your sanctity. Talk about a privileged entitlement.
The community is on autopilot with this endlessly repetitive debate.
Must be a pretty compelling debate if it keeps you writing it.
There's no hope of a resolution. Long ago, this whole discussion became nothing but an exercise in grandstanding.
Which is why you're still going to engage in the idea there is one? I mean, talk about grandstanding. Mr. Hindsight over here is acting like he's above it all when we've still 10 minutes of this drivel to go over.
I've pointed out before that for all my show gets accused of repeating points, which it does, yes, actual gamer discourse is itself perpetually recycled garbage.
I think the main problem isn't that you repeat yourself, but actively contradict repeating points you've made. And I don't know, Jim, the fact that the only thing you've really changed in the many years you've been on this site is your outward appearance doesn't really give you license to claim others have become complacent in their respective fields.
The same tiny handful of debates repeating themselves over and over again.
Jim, who do you think keeps repeating these debates? Who do you think kept regurgitating the gamers caused X argument, the likes of Jack Thompson and Aeneas Sarkeesian? If these game journalists didn't keep insisting this argument of theirs isn't purely selfish in nature, it wouldn't bear repeating to counter it in the first place.
Stupid and insignificant controversies surrounding review scores, whether or not a game is too woke for daring to have women and queers in it, the gatekeeping aversion to accessibility in protest of the mythical casualization of video games, and that's it, isn't it?
Jim, you engage in all of these topics on a weekly basis, so can you stop acting like as if you're above it all while acting as though you're the only one who's taken the red pill to realize it? Also, demanding an easy mode in video games will make them more casual by default, by the mere basis that it will drive more people to play it. Not like Elden Ring really needed the help, by the by, but I think the chief complaint about Elden Ring beyond the unbalanced scaling of certain areas and the repeat copy and paste bosses is the fact that it's easier in comparison to the Dark Souls series.
Craig, are there any more things that the gamers care about?
See what I mean? He quickly dipped out of specifying the audience and has now lumped gamers into this vague goo of thoughts and beliefs. Shit, even in the TLO2 video, he at least tried to make the distinction, even if it was with the petulant racism that only straight white boys would dare criticize something. But he doesn't even make that concession anymore, and this is the very audience he needs to keep his channel going, whether he wants to admit that or not.
That pretty much is all that the full-time hardcores who've made their entire identity gaming give a shit about, right?
Wrong.
I don't know, maybe not. I don't particularly care anymore.
Holy fucking shit, Jim. Maybe you shouldn't just come out and lampoon a bunch of people as being a one-track mind, while also admitting you've no idea what they actually believe in. I mean, my god, talk about intellectual laziness. You're the prime cut of that.
Maybe I left a few more regurgitated topics off the list, but it won't have been many.
And what if it was a lot then? What if the only reason these topics get regurgitated is because people like you have no interest to engage in them? Again, it's very ironic how he's trying to act aggressively apathetic about this topic, yet will still divulge his 2 cents anyway.
God, just fuck traditional gamer TM discourse. It's just so fucking puerile.
Jim, if you hate video games and the video gaming community, you can just come out and say it. It's not like you haven't already held your tongue on the subject because it's the only thing you can do at that venture, which, talk about regurgitating discourse, that's like your fucking lifeline.
And I've been doing this job for over 10 years and nothing's been resolved. Nothing has changed.
The fucking absolute ego of this maniac to act like, if only we listened to Jim, that every single problem currently infesting the gaming industry would be solved. I mean, I've seen some pretty egotistical people in my lifetime, but Jim is awfully stuck up on the idea of things not changing when he's barely changed one iota about his platform. Don't get me wrong, the same could be said for the likes of Yahtzee Croshaw of Zero Punctuation, but even he wouldn't try to unironically act like he's the fucking savior of the video gaming medium, or feign ignorance of his series having barely changed for over 10 years, by God.
Why did I respond to Jason Schreier's tweet? Why did I do it? Why do I do these things to myself? That's all my replies have been for days.
I don't know. You're starved for attention and crying out for help, however you can get it. I mean, it should be plain as day why, you already said it yourself. It's performative. Because, I mean, look at this exchange. Schreier gives legitimate good advice to those who would play Elden Ring, and what does Jim do? Whine and complain that someone would dare help to address a potential hang-up of the game, so you could eventually put it into a video that you somehow thinks makes you look good?
We could have all been just simping over this selfie, but instead everyone's talking about whether you need a notebook for Elden Ring.
So egotistical, in fact, he simps for himself, but nevertheless, I don't see how wanting a notebook to keep track of your story progression in Elden Ring is a repeat talking point, but it seems you're rambling now, and we've still yet to get to the topic at hand nearly 5 minutes in said video.
I shouldn't have done it. I do it to myself. Anyway, Elden Ring. It's a very good game. While we're on the topic, it's quite forgiving by Soulsborne standards.
And which Jim completely stubs his toe making the argument for easy modes in games when Elden Ring already by default is easier in comparison, and has a easy mode in regards to certain summons and weapons.
But given the series' penchant for punishing its players' mistakes, that's not saying too much.
So, like all games? Like, every game in some form or fashion punishes you for making mistakes. That's kind of one of the key elements of how a game can be enjoyable, and not whether you're just coasting by like you're on a small world after all. But, I mean, for someone who has done this for as long as you have, you'd think you would understand that, but oh well.
Regardless, there's been another shitstorm of debate over how accessible it should be.
If we're actually talking about accessibility options and not conflating it with there being an easy mode, the thing I recall is that Elden Ring was severely lacking in such factors, like with there being a colorblind mode and for the increase of font sizes. Which I dare you to try to find someone who actually has a problem with those being in a game in comparison to there being an easy mode.
Whether easy modes are the devil and the merits of obtuse, willfully uninformative game design.
I mean, making an easy mode in regards to Dark Souls games would require a lot more than people think it would, so how much allowance are we going to give in regards to how obtuse it is? Moreover, what game design of Elden Ring, pray tell, is willfully uninformative? Not that there isn't, but you being vague about it, as always, doesn't win me over to the idea you've considered this for 1 second.
And just, God, I'm tired of it. That's what I thought as my Twitter replies were inundated.
Considering you block every other person who happens to disagree with you, I have to question just how many, and more importantly, you can control how many replies you get in regard to that, but lo is the curse of having others living rent-free in your head on the internet. Maybe you should just put the fucking phone down.
I actually don't want to hear it anymore.
I suppose the only thing that has stayed consistent with Jim's talking points as of late is both his feigned apathy on the subject and his feigned dismissal of the subject's argument. So it's of no surprise it carries through here.
The fan base is indeed fucking exhausting. The get good attitude that has festered among hardcore Souls fans for years is truly contemptuous at this stage.
Contemptuous, you say? That's a pretty harsh way to characterize those who find fun in the challenge of the game. I mean, enjoy the game however you wish, but to expect others to stoop to your level of incompetence will get nothing short of that response.
Get Good once started as a joke, but has since been taken far too seriously by people who stake far too much of their self-esteem on whether or not they can fight a pretend dragon without any friends.
Remember, folks, this is the guy who doesn't make judgments on how people live their lives based on the arguments they make on the internet, telling you that people who want challenge are all but lacking in self-esteem, which, if anything, demanding an easy mode for every game is calling yourself out as lacking in self-esteem. Because if the challenge truly was meaningless, why would you want to lower the bar of it?
It's worth noting that nobody's actually impressed if you're brilliant at video games.
Are you actually serious with this statement, Jim? Why the fuck do you think esports exist? Just for the brand recognition? Or better yet, speedruns of many obscure and popular games like Elden Ring have thousands of people on the edge of their seat because of how impressive it must be for someone to have broken the game down to its bare parts. I mean, let's take this argument to the nth degree. I guess all competitive sports are just an exercise in waffling and not a demonstration of people competing at the peak of their performance. Or better yet, any game that has multiplayer PvP is apparently pointless by Jim's remark. Just because you don't find it impressive doesn't mean others won't, and you ain't no arbiter on how other people do or should feel about anything.
None of us actually care.
Let's rephrase that. You don't care. No one else, you. Also, bullshit. You actually do care. Otherwise, it wouldn't bother you that there are people who can play the game without the aforementioned easy mode and with many handicaps, either in or out of the game.
In fact, the more you brag about it as if it's worth a damn, the more we think you're fucking pathetic.
Coming from the people who demand an easy mode on the pretense it will be made more available to others. Sounds like a bit of insecurity drooling from that statement of yours.
Okay, that's harsh. It's okay to feel accomplished at making your way through a particularly challenging video game.
So are we just going to roll over the fact that you were calling all and any competitive person, no matter how aggressive their stance on competition is, pathetic? Somehow I don't believe the sincerity in what you just said, but let's see if the other shoe drops.
But once you start talking about it as if it makes you better than other people...
I mean, it literally does though. Why do you think scoreboards and leaderboards exist? Why do you think there are visual dopamine hits for whenever you're doing well in a game in the first place? Now, granted, I know your clarification is of those who are particularly braggadocious about being better than other people, which of course no one likes a braggart. But to also imply that there isn't any way to tell that someone is playing better than another person is frankly ignorant of you.
If you start sneering at those who needed help...
Again, I don't support that, but I'm not sure how that statement also falls in line with people who simply state that they can play video games better and can demonstrate as such. You'd be much better if you tried to clarify better rather than throw these generalities abound.
And bemoaning video games being made more welcoming to newcomers or those with disabilities.
Ah, yes. Because by Jim's bigotry of low expectations, he thinks disabled people are just as incapable of playing the game as able-bodied newcomers. There are literally people with no fucking hands who play shooters better than I could. Better than you could. So don't try to act like an easy mode is somehow placating to them specifically. All the while masking this virtue signaling to placate to you, whom doesn't have any disabilities other than the utter hubris of your talking points. What a fucking progressive you are.
You can just go ahead and fuck yourself.
Yes, Jim, go fuck yourself for trying to act like disabled people by virtue of their disability need your guidance to trek these gaming hurdles, when not only have they done so, but they do so better than you ever could. Now, how does that make your self-esteem feel?
Literally, fuck yourself, because Lord knows I don't think you should inflict your pointless little genitals on anybody else.
Hey, at least I own my genitals rather than yours being emasculated for the penchant of the holy woke crowd. Also, how able is Jim? Don't you know these disabled people might not have functioning genitals to use on other people? You need to be a better ally.
There's no debate to be had here. No argument.
Oh, for crying out loud. This old chestnut again? I mean, talk about repeating oneself. You can't, once again, act like as if there's no debate while having a debate about not having one. It's completely circular.
I could actually provide a litany of reasons why accessibility in a video game is good.
You know, you talked a big talk about how derivative video game conversations can be and that most, if not all, are intellectually lazy. Well, frankly, for my money, someone who claims they could provide arguments to their point and then proceed not to is the pinnacle of intellectually lazy. In fact, I would almost surmise to say when somebody does say that they actually don't have an argument and just want the benefit of claiming they ever did. Because if you did provide those arguments, you'd find yourself conflating accessibility with ease of difficulty, which would be done away the moment any would-be disabled person could beat a game better than any able-bodied person could. You aren't constrained by time, you're only constrained by your willingness to engage in it, which if you aren't, who's calling who lazy now?
I could point you to Laura Kate Dale's Accessibility series. In fact, actually go look at that series, it's very good.
Now, I did look this up, although with there being over 100 videos, I'm not certain if there was a specific video he had in mind for this, or is seriously suggesting I do, I guess I'm intellectually lazy in that regard, watch all of them. But I looked at the first on the list, and nowhere does the video ever mention adding easy mode to all games as a accessibility option. Then again, Mischief made a response to one of her videos in which she does argue that Dark Souls needs an easy mode for accessibility reasons, so perhaps I'm being a bit too charitable to her in comparison to you.
But to make the arguments here on this show, I feel like I'd be wasting my goddamn time, because they just need to be said again the next time a hard game is released and gamers TM glom onto it to swing their dicks around.
I mean, the answer to solving that is right in front of you. Literally forward people to another video where you break down the argument like you did with Laura Kate Dale, but again, I suspect that you actually have no arguments and not that you find the topic to be tiresome to discuss.
Let me just say this, plain as day, the more accessibility options a video game has, the better.
Jim, if you hadn't noticed from the screenshot you just chose, assuming you chose them, not one of your producers, notice how none of the options have anything regarding the difficulty of the game? But of course you've engaged in both intellectual laziness and intellectual dishonesty, since you're going to confuse the difference between difficulty and accessibility while simultaneously trying to lump the two together, so now you can try to claim gamers actually just hate disabled people.
And that's just that. That's just the way it is. This isn't a subjective opinion. There is no debate here. It's a stone cold, goddamn, fucking fact.
But you know what isn't a stone cold fact? That making games easy, or giving an easy mode to games, makes them accessible to disabled people, or that easy modes are an accessibility option thereof.
Literally every game is better when it has more accessibility options, and the more accessibility options literally every game has, the better.
And notice, Jim, again, how none of these accessibility options you so adore have nothing to do with there being an easy mode.
Like, it's never made sense to me that anybody would have a problem with more people enjoying a good game.
Jim, at some point you have to realize that not all games are made for you. Monster Hunter World was a game that I tried and did not find myself enjoying. But the last thing I would ever want is for that game to cater to my needs at the expense of those who diligently love that series. Because nothing about how they would change it would ever make me want to go back to it. It's the same aversion to gatekeeping media that has made many a beloved franchise, as you said, too woke, but so blasé as to be indistinguishable from anything else. More importantly, the people who are already turned off by the likes of Souls-like games aren't just suddenly going to change their mind on it the moment an easy mode becomes available. So in your feeble attempt to cater to everyone, you inevitably cater to no one.
First of all, more people having a nice time is never bad. Why would you not want other people to have a nice time unless you're a misanthropic shitfucker?
Ah, so now you're trying to claim that people are gatekeeping fun from the experience, when part of the fun of the experience is the challenge of the game. If a game already has an easy mode, more power to them, and I for one agree that I don't like elitists who insist that a game has a ideal difficulty setting, like the likes of Doom Eternal fans who insist Nightmare and above is the only valid difficulty to play it on. Although in the same breath, I wouldn't want that game to be made arbitrarily easier to cater to lowest common denominator, and in turn, vastly change the outcome of the experience for everyone.
Second of all, if you love these games as much as you claim, surely you want more people to enjoy it.
Jim, part of the reason people love these games is fundamentally because of their challenge. So taking that aspect away means people are invariably going to love the game for different reasons than those who originally were sold to it.
The more successful the game is, the more it reaches people, the more money it'll make, the more content will be made available, the more game you will have to enjoy.
See, this is why I find it odd how Jim has backed this easy mode argument on the precipice of Elden Ring, when not only is it considerably easier as he just stated, but also sold like hotcakes in spite of it still being conventionally harder than most other games. Elden Ring doesn't need an easy mode to make more money, and by saying that it does, implies that adding easy mode is, by his account, appealing to lowest common denominator, and not because it makes it more accessible.
Plus, the more successful a game is, the more people that it reaches, the happier the developers will be. And do they not deserve to be happy?
And what if what makes the developers happy is seeing people overcome their difficult games by their own means? I can't believe that Jim has to understand the concept that money doesn't buy happiness, but by God, baseline profit isn't nor shouldn't be the only incentive to make any game, for crying out loud. For someone who decries such slimy trends in the gaming industry in order to reach mass appeal, he seems to condone it in this regard. I mean, doesn't it also make developers happy when they have whales who will buy oodles and oodles of money into microtransactions that they arbitrated in their games? And shouldn't they deserve that happiness, Jim?
After making you happy. The only people who would, in fact, have a problem with that are pricks. Gatekeeping. Elitist. Sad little pricks.
This is what the out-group thinks of the in-group, wanting to be part of the in-group. Gatekeep your media before they gatekeep you.
And this is why I decided to make no substantive arguments in favour of accessibility today, because the people who need to hear it explicitly don't want to.
So that's the cop-out you're going to make. I could make arguments, but no one wants to hear them. As you claim these people who don't want to hear them are intellectually lazy, philosophically cowardly, should have no right to use their genitals upon others, and the like. Yeah, I wonder why they won't hear you out, Jim. It's almost like slinging shit on one side often gets that shit being slung back your way. But let's be honest, Jim, you never had any arguments to make for it. You've rambled and ranted for the better part of 2/3 of this vid in this performative whinging about how accessibility is the same as having an easy mode, while presuming yourself the protector of disabled people whom never needed your fucking help. It's honestly quite despicable how these people to you are nothing more than ammunition to your argument, or in your own words, bullets for their logic gun, and that you'll dispose of them as quickly as you dispose yourself of these arguments when convenient. This metaphorical group is just a cold calculation of how you can defeat some other metaphorical group, careless to any nuances found within them and dismissive of the nuances when present. As someone who suffers from Asperger's and has a brother who suffers from ADHD, a good hearty fuck you is all you'll get to the many people you claim to stand for.
They don't care. They're selfish. They only view these games through the single lens of how they want to play it, how they engage with the medium, and what they believe is the one true way to experience video games.
Wouldn't demanding an easy mode for games also stating confidently that there is only one way to play a game? Because you already tripped on yourself saying that it's perfectly okay to find it fun to challenge yourself in a game, but by introducing this means you don't believe that. Otherwise, people should try to improve themselves rather than insist reality bend to their flagrantly low standards.
Anything that dares to challenge or confront that is met with hostility.
Well, God be damned if some hardcore gamer is a bit defensive when some games journal claims they're gatekeeping the medium by not allowing every game to have a journalist mode. Like, do you just expect people to take the toxic shit you said straight to the chin and not react in kind?
Because on the whole, a lot of these people only know or care about video games. They don't have other interests.
Okay, Mind Reader Jim, could you be even less charitable to the other side than you already have been?
If there's one thing Gamergate taught us, with all its gatekeeping, elitism, and hatred of minorities...
What in the 9 fucking divines does Gamergate have anything to do with arguments for accessibility? For crying out loud, by the time I turn 50, I won't ever hear the end of how every major political event after 2014 somehow could be traced back to that campaign. But ironically enough, apparently, there are other things that gamers are more concerned about if Gamergate is anything to go by, but Jim once again seemed to forget that statement he made within the span of this video, and is just using it as a scapegoat boogeyman it has always been since its peak. But Alright, let's entertain the notion that Gamergate was gatekeeping and hated minorities. Does the Not Your Shield hashtag that was marching in lockstep to this not bear any mention to this? Does gatekeeping extend to the way that the gaming journalism medium was incredibly incestuous, the very thing that Gamergate wanted to call attention to? I swear, the only reason people have to purposefully misinterpret Gamergate this way while trying to exhume and beat this dead horse in relation to anything is because the people who lost in that campaign are still ass mad about it years later.
It's that people with no form of enrichment outside of video games can be right dickhead.
Oh yeah, seeing as Jim did bring up Gamergate out of nowhere, is this another example of you saying your politics mildly when I was yet again proven right that you'll bring up any politic regardless of its relation to the topic at hand? But apparently the gamers are the ones who find no enrichment outside of video games when Jim finds no enrichment in them.
Those who have pinned their entire sense of self on a single geeky medium naturally don't want a diverse range of people to get into video games.
There are people whose entire careers are based in video games who have welcomed all walks of life into their community. What are you on about? Your own audience are completely enraptured in video games, and I'm sure they are by and large fine with many of folk playing them. It only goes to show in your continued petulance towards the very medium you've milked for the last 10 years that you've not a single shred of awareness on what gamers think.
Because then it will reflect how much of an individual they aren't.
What? I don't know if you need to hear this, Jim, but people don't use video games as a way to shape about their identity. I know it's prescient of you to insist that it does, otherwise your entire way of life has been just a meat grinder of recycled ideas, becoming less and less transparent as of late, but no, people don't usually play video games as themselves unless you're the absolute egomaniac in your own imagination.
When loving video games became mainstream, a lot of people who love only video games didn't feel special anymore.
And conversely, the people who hated video games before they became mainstream realized they were alone, screaming into the void, so they had to join the bandwagon, vis-a-vis you, who finds no beauty in the idea of challenge or improvement in a medium that is the most meritocratic at times, would also insist that there is nothing special in the plight of challenge. So you wouldn't be special if you got the outcome you wanted, because now there is no inherent joy to playing video games principally.
So to the supposed From Software fans, the really hardcore ones who get way too invested in this shit, please stop.
No. No, I don't think I will.
You'll be on the point crossed by the Undertale fan community at this point, which I say as a huge Undertale fan.
I mean, Undertale isn't particularly challenging, nor really all that engaging, so I think the reason the fans get so loved is mainly to do with their obnoxious chanting of it, like with the Rick and Morty fans and the like. A bit of a different beast to slay in comparison to the Dark Souls community.
Your endlessly antagonistic and frankly miserable attitudes whenever a new game comes out just puts people the fuck off.
Oh, but surely you haven't been antagonistic once to warrant that kind of derision back, have you? It's not like you claim that there is no joy to overcoming a challenging boss, or being a skilled player in PvP, or that these competitive people have no other desires in life other than playing the game. Sometimes I wonder if Jim is even aware of the vibes that he gives off.
Which I guess is indeed what you want.
Yes, please do.
Clearly want to limit the number of people who can enjoy these games.
Because games are not meant to be enjoyed by everyone. There will never be a game that will be the Morbius of our time that the entire human consensus will agree they've enjoyed. Even the most lauded of games come with its detractors and contrarians, and I don't think they're looking for the game to be more appealing to them.
But speaking as someone who really enjoys From Software's output, it's just fucking draining at this point. And you know, for all of your self-aggrandizing, for all of your representing yourself as a true Soulsborne fan, you're not actually representative of the proper Soulsborne fan base.
Aren't they, Jim? Because from what you've been saying these last few minutes, they do speak on some behalf of the community, but for as vague as you have been, for as cherry-picked as you've made them out to be, of course this community is as flexible as taffy when it comes to their mindset on anything.
You may visibly represent it through the sheer volume of your caterwauling, but you're not representative of what the series is designed for.
Wait, are we just pulling a no true Soulsborne fan fallacy now? Because earlier you insisted they are representative of the inherent difficult curve found within them, now they aren't? And doing this all in the service to exclaim that video games need an easy mode too, no less.
Who the series is designed for. Because for as much as it challenges and punishes a player, it's a series of jolly cooperation, of experiencing hardship together, and despite the ability to invade the worlds and ruin the lives of other players.
So you're going to frame the competitive aspects of the game, mainly the PvP, as inherently negative to the game's experience, and cooperation is purely good. You do realize both of those things are completely opt-in now, something that was an issue with wanting to play Soulsborne games solo. I mean, you say you're a Soulsborne fan and stream yourself playing Elden Ring, but apparently that knowledge escapes you.
In the face of its overwhelming challenge, the Soulsborne series is ultimately about not being a fucking dick to other people.
Oh, no. Don't tell me you're going to pull an IHE and claim that you can't criticize The Last Jedi because its themes in the movie are about hope and finding positivity through hardship, are you? Please tell me you aren't.
Let me explain that point.
Oh, please do, seeing as you yet to explain all the others.
Many years ago, when Demon's Souls was released, I made this argument that it is one of the best multiplayer experiences, and I wasn't actually talking about any of the cooperative or invasive elements of the game. I was actually talking about the little phantoms you see of other players existing in the world in the same areas as you. If you are unfamiliar, Elden Ring does this as well. You see very temporary glimmers of other players in the same area as you, performing actions in real time. Just the character models rolling, fighting, exploring, whatever.
I mean, in the most technical sense it would be multiplayer, although it's a pretty tenuous stretch given all that phantoms really do is inform you of either loot or potential traps along the way.
And I absolutely loved that as a concept because to me it sent the message that even if you're on your own, you and a whole bunch of other players are suffering together. And that to me was a very crucial point of that experience.
Yeah, but in the same games, people can literally send troll messages of there being loot down a bottomless pit or deliberately kill themselves and mislead players into thinking something valuable is nearby. Not all the phantoms you see are there for your own benefit. In fact, I find the fact that Dark Souls games to be cheeky in its morbid nature to be one of its main charms. You can either be helpful or be a dick, and the game is indifferent to it either way.
You might be facing all of these hardships, you might be facing them on your own, but so is everybody else.
That's all well and good, but how is this in any way an argument for there being an easy mode? Wouldn't having that easy mode make seeing those phantoms utterly redundant of a mechanic? But I tend to forget, you already said you weren't going to make substantive arguments for there to be an easy mode.
Shared suffering. It's better than suffering on your own. I certainly know that when I'm going through a rough, traumatic, upsetting time, I find myself wishing everybody else was.
Jim, I don't think it's a good look for you to casually state your sociopathic tendencies to the world about how you need others to suffer to feel good about yourself. But considering the thesis of this whole video was just to whine and bicker about others just so you can feel good about yourself, this is part and parcel of your daily life. How exactly do you even maintain the audience you do without them getting a bit wary of the things you say on a daily basis? Unless they too are sociopaths, which is a scary number to consider watching, but I just want to believe that with complacency in mind, people watch this video like eating empty calories, nod, and move on with the rest of them.
So yeah, that's what the Soulsborne series has always meant to me. Shared suffering, shared pain, and I think a lot of the people who truly love that series sort of embrace.
And how exactly is this doing favors for your accessibility argument again? Unless boredom is something people can share their suffering in when playing a game with others.
We see this in the messages that are left on the floor for other players, warning them of impending doom.
And the messages that are literally just sexually suggestive and gaslight there being impending doom, but go on.
We see this with the amount of players that actually post up for cooperative play, which is one of my favourite things to do. I'm very much a dedicated son bro. I'm all about the co-op.
Good for you, but it's just a bit awkward to transition from, I have to see others suffer if I feel bad, to, I'm all about that lovely cooperation, bro. But hey, not like you can bother editing out parts of the script that aren't doing you many favors.
And that's what I mean when I say that I'm better at video games than you, than all of you. I am just the best one because I understand video games and you don't.
Really now, because the concept of challenge seems to elude you, the concept of being challenged eludes you, and the concept of people who find value in wanting a challenge eludes you, which are fundamental to enjoying yourself in a game. Because if it didn't, what incentive do you really have to play it? I distinctly remember one of my builds in Elden Ring using the Mimic tier summon, not realizing how insanely broken it was in the game even after its nerfs, and felt that I cheated myself out of the experience. So much so that I started to get extremely sloppy in the way I would fight, blatantly taking hits, wasting away flash drinks, and acting too aggressive in bouts because I always had the insurance knowing that the Mimic tier could be a convenient fallback strategy. Which is why in future runs I didn't use the Mimic tier and found the experience more engaging because now I became challenged by the core mechanics. And I'm not going to be one to say you're wrong for using any given item or weapon, be as broken as they may be, but surely overcoming obstacles by making these concerted decisions is its own reward, is it not? And after that entire performative drivel, the video is over, and I'm not going to bother covering the shilling portion of it as it's completely irrelevant. Just like how irrelevant and detached Jim has been from engaging in any topic he addresses, and is only doing so by committee and obligation to the few watchers who still bother to witness the bell notifications on their YouTube homepage. I know I said it before in the TLO2 vid, how much of an exercise in futility it is to try to worm any reasoning out of Jim, but at this rate it's become fun to witness a man, or woman now, trying to assume the perspectives of others outside of his further constricting echo chamber as he falls ever deeper into the pits of insanity. It'd make you wonder how Jim would ever expect others to listen to him if he can't share that same generosity to the likes of me and many whom he blocked, while bemoaning the fact that nothing of what he has said has come through. He has become an agent of his own downfall, trapped in this circular minefield of negativity he surrounds himself in, with no contingencies to escape it. So all we can do now is laugh at a man who has fervently made his bed, accusing us of making him lie in it.